Welcome to our webinar, A Digital Mooring System Management Plan from our sponsors, Ocean Manager. Our guest speakers today are Master Mariner and LNG Terminal Compatibility Expert, Captain Pawan Gupta, and Rajan Vasudevan, CEO of Ocean Manager. Here is our host, Carl Jeffrey from Digital Ship to explain more.
Okay, so our topic today is your digital mooring system management plan. So mooring rope related accidents are coming out as one of the biggest safety risks in shipping today. That's partly because we've done a good job at reducing other risks, but still it's a good reason to pay attention to mooring. There was a news story just a week last Saturday, September the 17th, about a mooring line breaking on a product tanker loading gasoline in Venezuela. So after the mooring line broke, the cargo hose broke and the hydrocarbons flowed out and caught fire. Now, we're talking about mooring system management. So a big part of that is keeping track of how long and how much you've been using your ropes, so you've got an idea what the conditions are. But there's also terminal regulations to keep track of with different requirements in different terminals. There's also a lot of money involved because the ropes on a ship can cost up to $150,000. You don't want to be replacing them much earlier than you need to. You need a system because otherwise you've got to rely on crew or some paper method to manage all the knowledge, and you've got the crew members changing all the time and ship will always going to different ports. And the system also helps with learning. You've got to make sure your crew are aware with the requirements and the guidance. So the company presenting and sponsoring the webinar today, Ocean Manager, developed the software for mooring working together with Evergas Ship Management. They've got 2 very large ethane carriers, 8 multi-gas carriers, and 6 LPG carriers. Our first speaker is Rajan Vasudevan, founder and CEO of Ocean Manager. He's based in San Francisco, and to keep our webinar on a time zone for people in Europe and Asia, he's got up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do the webinar, but he looks great, as you can see. Rajan has been developing fleet management software since 2009. And our second speaker today is Captain Pawan Gupta. He's based all the way across in Mumbai. He's a master mariner and LNG terminal ship-shore compatibility expert. He's been involved in mooring system analysis. He's done TMSA audits, and he's also developed over 100 mooring system management plans. So he's going to explain the importance of mooring system management and the basics of it. We're thinking we're going to have about 25 minutes of presentations, and we should have plenty of time for your questions, either about mooring management itself or the software. So I'd like to invite Rajan to start the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, so much for inviting us to this webinar, and so pleased to have Captain Gupta join us on across the world. So I'm going to start my presentation today with a brief introduction of the company. We are been in business since 2009, and our forte is developing enterprise software for ship management companies. And I think today our presentation is on the digital mooring system management plan, called the MSMP in short. And I'm joined by Captain Gupta. So as Carl mentioned, that we are looking at mooring incidents, and some statistics do show that that from P&I clubs that the personal injuries due to mooring incidents are the most expensive in 2009, and probably they continue to be so. Also these incidents, as of last 10 days back, 2 of them, one probably a very expensive one with a fire in Venezuela, and the second was probably an embarrassment that a mooring broke off for a cruise ship with 870 passengers on board, and to a pretty extreme case of a fatal injury of a chief officer almost a year back. So these are unfortunate incidents, and they hopefully never end up into and we don't find such incidents. So the issue is to see where the trends and the impacts are on the industry. This is a wake-up call for everyone to take serious note of these matters. In addition to safety, we also are to take into account that a typical vessel typically has about $100,000 to $500,000 worth of mooring related inventory, which includes ropes, tails, and all depends on the quality of the ropes that you are procuring. And as you see, there are a large number of very reputed manufacturers, and the selection process, as you notice, are best match. And they do look at the measured strength, the service length, the reliability, the abrasion resistance and creep performance, the construction and quality, and the last is cost. But typically we flip it around. The cost tends to be the driver, and it is the other points are fairly technical in nature and sometimes out of the understanding of the procurement cycle. So this can all be demystified and hopefully made relevant to our conversation today. And I want to bring into background an excellent thought process and a publication by OCMF, which is MEC 4, the Mooring Equipment Guidelines. And this was published back in 2018 and replaced the MEC 3 in light of all the learnings. And they actually recommend mooring system design, selection, maintenance, and retirement procedures. And eventually it boils down to ensuring that each vessel has a specific MSMP plan. We have a fleet-wide line management plan, and we are able to provide guidance for line procurement. So this publication typically would translate into a document that is prepared by an expert like Captain Pawan. A typical MSP plan would contain of several parts that consist of the details put together. And this is a typical document that you'd have it either in the print format or a Word document, PDF, that is available on every vessel. Captain Pawan, do you want to highlight a bit about the MSMP process of how you develop it, since you have developed over 100 such plans? What does it entail to develop a vessel-specific plan? Do you want to chime in?
Thank you, Rajan, and Carl as well, to give this opportunity. What I would like to say that as such, the OCMF has done a great job by bringing in MEG 4, MEG 3, like people like us who were sailing on ships and later on working in office. MEG 3, though they say that it is like a, one of the books so important for us, like a Bible in, management of ships, especially, moorings and everything. But it has always been a bit difficult to understand that book. It has been written, it's very difficult to understand where it is moving from naval architecture information to somebody like, mariners sailing on ships. So it's been a bit confusing. And at times the terminology were not so very clear. And so MEG 4 actually brought out this thing with a complete distinguished or differentiation between the hardware and the software part of it, and it sort of tried to make the things much easier. It brought in some new terminology like SDMBL and all other things like WLL, and and with some graphs and with good photographs, it made things more simplistic for mariners to understand. And yes, great effort. And I can tell you that, of course, the incidents are still happening, damage is still happening, but they are on the reduction side. So OCMF is doing a good job. MSMP is actually adding on to it. MSMP, the concept is very good. The information which is there inside it, required inside it, is also very good. But then, unless the data input is correct, data input what is done is updated regularly, and it is analyzed properly, the information is of no use. Okay. And also, it is also very important that this document of whatever 50 to 70 pages worth of it does not go into our ship's library like another manual, one more manual. This is what during the vessel visits or in discussion with the masters, other officers, we come to know, yes, there is something called new plan has come, MSMP has come. What does it really do? Is it really, how does it helping us? I think that awareness is still missing. And in that way, it is very important that, especially with the digitization, culture at the forefront, very important. This information is sort of collated properly. It is updated as and when the things are being changed, and then the data is analyzed nicely, and this analysis is fed back into the system, and then it comes as a action points to the ship staff as well as to the shore staff. So I think what it is a good sort of a thing what has been done. Yes, at least the data collation has started. Analysis will start as and when you have sufficient data inside it, and you have to work parallelly onto the awareness of the people, and then it will work. So how do we do it? Yes, we get all the plans, everything about the vessel. We have all the IMO circulars. We try to check the whether the SDMBL calculation is good with the equipment number and how the yard has done it. We try to we discuss with the class at times whether if there is any change coming in the calculation as per equipment number or as per the yard. We try to confirm it, and with all this exercise we see that whether the planning, and then we also we work on Optimur ourselves. We try to do the analysis as required under the MSMP. So we do it in-house, and we try to see it whether the vessel is in compliance with the 60 knots and 60 knots wind and 3 knots, 2 knots and 0.75 knots current criteria. So all this exercise is done, and then we submit this. All our tankers, I think we still had few questions during the vetting inspections. We are able to sort of clarify the master's doubts or the vetting inspector's doubt. And we have done some training sessions also for 3-4 companies whom we are sort of preparing this MSMP. But I can tell you that there is a whole lot of work which has been done, and a whole lot of work is required also. So it's like a work in progress. Over to you, Rajan.
Thank you, Captain Pawan. So it takes a lot of effort to develop a MSMP plan, and I try to bring the point that once doing that, an idea is only as good as its execution. So building a document like a MSMP plan that ranges between 50 to 70 to 90 pages, we're trying to look at the impact and saying, are they really helping us reduce any mooring related incidents? Are the costs that are invested into this, are they coming down or being optimally utilized? And are the crew more aware of these guidelines and use them as a practitioner? So I think the execution matters, and we need to provide people with the right tools and technology to make them enable that. Our submission is that it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes an entire ecosystem to make sure that we can execute this plan. It starts by a supposition that having to digitize this data through an EMSMP or a digital mooring system management plan in combination with expert consultants who kind of understand all the guidelines and put all the information together and have the expertise to answer questions that are related when you're doing mooring operations and get them the right compatibility, like Captain Pawan does. And there are other consultants as well who also have bring in the same expertise. And the software that we have developed is in consultation with such experts and with our collaborators. These are actually companies like Evergas who helped us give the feedback to build the software. Eventually, the goal is that we are able to reduce costs, and this is an interesting dimension that when we are trying to improve safety, we're also having a double impact on either reducing costs or optimizing the costs and translating the simplification to a procurement cycle that ensure that we have the right amount of the right kind of materials being selected, and they are procured from the right manufacturers, and they actually are suitable for mooring operations at various ports. So this is like I call a double whammy, where you are ensuring that the crew is able to engage and also learn from the guidelines in a practical way. What we are trying to suppose is that with a digital mooring system plan, what we are able to look at the compliance, and so the software is able to implicitly able to look at compliance and flag up when there is non-compliance, and these rules that are required with the MBLs and the the loads, it's computed internally, and ensuring that those are within the accepted ranges. We are able to capture any incidents that happen to ensure that we can actually baseline and measure the overall reduction. The cost can be reduced by ensuring that we are engaging with manufacturers, ensuring that they are getting the right visibility and able to provide the right technical specs that can feed into a software for ensuring that we are recommending the right kind of ropes, and their alignment with their mooring operations. End of the day, it's able to put all the information in a way that can be organized, and not having to work with Excel sheets and different versions of facts, and actually aligning this information for port-side inspections. In the end, the idea is that you are able to use this tool to align all the information set, to have a successful port-side inspection or even a site inspection related to mooring incidents. A typical mooring plan, as I said, is a comprehensive approach where we are ensuring that we have a TMSA compliance for tankers, and we are able to successfully pass the side and CDI inspection audits, providing them a compliance. In fact, the data is helping us make decisions, and we are able to integrate with other advances like condition monitoring systems that are triggering off signals and helping us ensure that the mooring conditions are the rope conditions and the mooring data is collated. Typically, you are ensuring that the ropes are maintained with respect to a time-bound frequency or a running hours. In addition, you can integrate signals from conditions as well. Captain Pawan, do you want to share some more insight into this entire cycle that you look at?
Yeah, thanks, Rajan. One thing which is very important as per the MAG4 and MSMP is that we need to keep a track of whatever is happening on board, starting from the shipbuilding stage till the time the vessel is sort of scrapped. So it's like this is something like a activity where we keep it's a part of the management of change. If there is any change happening, it has to be recorded. So whether this is with respect to the hardware or the software, so whatever changes are happening, this particular software helps to record those changes, and automatically it improves the MAG compliance. Okay, and being a MAG compliance, then it automatically helps in good rating in the TMSA as well. And of course, the cost, as like everybody says, so a lot of superintendent must be also hearing here, along with the owners' representatives, that when suddenly there is a push for going for HMP rope, initially everybody thought it's like another sort of a way of bringing some mooring suppliers into the system, So that's what one thought process comes. But yes, HMP ropes have been successful. Costs were very high initially now, but they are coming less than $10,000, $8,000. So things are, but yes, at times they can be, the cost has been prohibitive. But once you have it, it's very important that they are maintained well. So that's where their life cycle management or their conditioning monitoring plays a very important role. And but then the crew should be well trained. They say everywhere they try to bring a manufacturer, but how many times a manufacturer can visit the vessel? No. So we need to train our master, chief officer, or some of the younger officers in checking the conditions and advising officers or the superintendents to really make sure that the rope conditions assessment part is good, and accordingly the decision monitoring improves. So I think in that way, this particular software, which I'm sure in phase 2 or phase 3, Rajan will work in bringing in some AI, where we have a perfectly good mooring, and in comparison with the present mooring, and it is able to sort of help identify with that at what level it has reached, and accordingly the superintendent and the master can decide whether it's time for replacement or we can still do some operation. So all these things, I think it's very important that we take help of the technology. It's going to stay. Shipping is adopting it in a big way in other sectors. And why do we leave this very important section of our where the incidents are involved, the damages are involved, and where I can tell you the vessels are failing actually at times the terminal clearances because of this. So, and which the cost, if you see the consequential losses for that is very, very high, you know, where a charterer losing not able to load or discharge into a terminal because of the compatibility issue can be very, very bad actually. So considering all this, it's very important that owners and operators pay good attention to this particular aspect and maintain this so well, and also focus on the crew training, because unless the superintendents and the crew are trained to sort of in these all these aspects of MSMP, the MSMP is not going to be so successful. Over to you, Rajan.
Thank you, Pawan. So I do agree that the roadmap for any software starts with version 1 and has a future, and definitely the incorporation of AI and ML and various techniques to simplify the product. And I think it also is a great platform to collate knowledge. As you said, every terminal, every mooring operation has some lessons learned, and the ability for the software to collate all that knowledge and share with others is the key element of a knowledge management as well. So in the end, the value of this tool is as good as its I would say the potential. And I think this is a great opportunity to put everybody together from safety, procurement, and building a good knowledge base with consultants. A typical suiting system, what we trying to share some screenshots just to give you a feel that the software is cloud hosted and lets you access it both from shore and from the vessel. And we've had success having the vessel directly enter data, which means that it should be easy to use, and being able to be monitored from the shore, and creating an engagement with the vessel and the crew on board almost is I think a starting point of a successful software implementation. A typical vessel would be able to give you a dashboard that demonstrates and highlights areas where you have some non-compliance, where retirement extensions are due, where retirement extensions have been made, provisioned, inspections are overdue, where lines are due for retirement. It gives you a kind of a summary about any incidents, any damage reports, any shortfalls, and actually the good news is about how many operations are you able to do without incidents, which is a good way to measure a good implementation plan. We also are able to get some graphs out of the data, which gives you a feel of where the condition monitoring is, the condition of the ropes, able to see a demographics of the line age, able to understand the running hours and the choice of materials made in the fleet. So we want to give you a quick feel about a plan that is easy to implement. Digital in format is not only able to collate all the information in one system, but also create collaboration within the vessel and the shore. Give you some, I would say, dashboards regarding where you need attention and action. And the data is able to visually demonstrate to you the conditions of the implementations. I think that being said, the software is open for trials, and we are now open for any Q&A. I'm going to hand this over back to Digital Ship to see if they have any Q&A on the subject.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, that's very interesting. So to the audience, we're going into the Q&A questions. So if there's any questions you'd like to put into the Q&A box. The subject I'm personally very interested in, it's sort of mental load on seafarers. I mean, we keep hearing, the fatigue and people are overwhelmed and there's a lot of paperwork, and systems like this can make it easier for them or it can make it worse for them, I guess, depending on how well it's designed, I suppose, isn't it? Really good software should make it much easier for crew, but it's very, very hard to do that and very expensive. I don't know if maybe Captain Gupta, with your experience as a seafarer yourself, I mean, how if you show crew that there's an extra thing you have to do, they're probably going to say no, aren't they? But how do you think this fits into how you actually feel, or your mental capability as a seafarer, do you think?
Carl, is this, do you want me to answer the question which are there on the screen? Is that right?
Yeah, well, you can start with this one, then we can go into, I mean, obviously Captain Prashant Saxena is also,
Okay.
how are we addressing human factors is more or less the same question, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. So I tell you, one way MEG4 definitely have focus on human factors. And but if you think about MSMP is a bit lacking on the training aspects of it. That's why I brought in this thing that unless we include this aspect, the implementation is going to be sort of poor. And it's very important that we bring in the it's like it's one of the action points, but it is very well connected with the rest hours and the training programs and all those things. But yes, if you really want that the mooring trainings or mooring equipment trainings, and even not only the assessment trainings should be included, which I feel it should happen through MSMP. So Captain Saxena, good question, and I can say that it is not fully addressed, especially in the MSMP aspect of it. And this software, through this software, we are trying to cover it, is that the training is a very important part of it, and training by manufacturers becomes pretty important in this.
Right. If I can just also chime in, I think we talked of the execution and of the idea, and so I think having a software that is easy to use makes it. And I give a classic case of Facebook or even WhatsApp. We did not require training to use it. So yeah, I totally agree with the fact that, and it should not be another overload on the crew member as any additional administrative burden, and one should be able to simplify the matters without having to go through exhaustive training. At the same time, the impact of this requires training. So I think the focus can move away from record keeping to more about transparency and availability of information, so that one can see the data trending not only on their own vessel, but across sister vessels or other vessels in the fleet. So I think the end of the day, the collaboration is the knowledge is going to be key. And the human factors are definitely important. I think what we have seen that with the minimum of training hours, the master or the crew has been able to get this up and running, and I think that's the key. So if you have to spend multiple hours, so it's a double-edged sword. If you're not spending enough hours, we don't know whether it's effective. At the same time, if it's taking too much hours to train to use the system, it also is more cumbersome. So I think it's a definitely an important element that we have to be able to use the information effectively, and that's available.
Oh, okay. Well, we've got four questions now. I'll just say to the audience, you can upvote questions if you like, clicking that thumbs up sign, so we can see if there's a question you're most interested in. But I guess otherwise we can start from the top. So Narutha Loganathan is asking, is the software going to tell you if the ropes are MEG4 compliant and when they're due for retirement? I suppose it's counting how long you're using the ropes, like the working hours, and I guess you've linked that to what MEG4 is asking for. Do you want to take that, Rajan?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, so I think the dashboard is the key element that one should be able to quickly hone on as to where are the areas of attention. So it's very so the dashboard does show that not only across the fleet, but also on a very specific vessel, we highlight the ropes that are due for retirement, and there is a workflow process if they are seeking extensions. Practically we see that sometimes there are ropes that are not used, and there are ropes that are often used, and so unless we keep a tab and make sure that we're not retiring ropes that have not been used, we can always seek extensions. So keeping a tab on the running hours and also the life and proper maintenance is important for seeking extensions. So a system like this allows you to keep track of workflow for approvals and extensions as well. So as I said, keeping a tab on your entire inventory creates an optimal use of that, and that is the I would say optimizing the investment as well. So the answer is thank you.
Okay, so question from Robin Collett. So by the way, Robin is a general manager of Samson Ropes from Samson Ropes EMEA. So he's asking, so I guess maybe for Captain Gupta, your view on the various HMPE ropes. I think Samson Ropes makes HMPE ropes, it may be wrong. I don't know this question. How do you know if full M4 testing has been completed? I'm not sure if he means before you put it on the ship or afterwards. I suppose he must mean. But do you want to?
No. I think I did use Samson ropes when I was in Makilab, so we know. And of course, if you ask me when I was operations superintendent there, for me the MEG4 testing, the certificate from the class was sufficient. So this is what we relied, and most of us actually don't go deeper than this. This is the limitation, and we trust the supplier. So we trust the supplier who's there, and I think Samson itself being such a big supplier, and there are others, but yes, it also raises one question that there are many new suppliers are coming up around the world, especially for different parts of the world, and the owners and operators have to do a good due diligence in that.
Can I chime in as well? I think there's interesting opportunity here. So Samson Ropes is obviously a established brand, as Captain Gupta said. He's been using it as well, and there have been new manufacturers as well. So question is, how do we give reverse feedback, which is information that is actually arising in the industry and giving back to the manufacturers? So when you have a manufacturer who's producing a material and there are competition out there, how do you benchmark and baseline operational data? And I think the opportunity is to give a reverse feedback to manufacturers and demonstrate to them how they can improve, I would say, the experience, we call the user experience of the ropes, and fill in the gaps with regards to awareness of the materials, the construction types, which are somehow done implicitly with a certificate that can be explicitly understood through practical means. So I think there is a big role of manufacturers to engage, and I think engagement is the key word, to not only educate, but also differentiate, and also take feedback from the industry back into their own cycle. So it becomes a living document or a living ecosystem that feeds off from information, knowledge from each other. So I think just relying on certificate is definitely an important one, but should not be the only one. And eventually the word of mouth, the experience that one user has with another, is the way we learn as a society. So I think a software just lets us share experiences as well and give feedback to the manufacturers. So I think I wanted to highlight the role of a manufacturer as well in this plan, and having them to encourage them to engage on this experience.
Okay, we've got a question next from Rajan Pravesh Kumar. LinkedIn says he's Chief Officer at K-Line Ship Management. He's saying he's seen mooring system management plans developed by a few consultants, but there's a SIRE CDI inspectors asking about wear zone management when they come on board. So I don't know what wear zone management is, if it's part of the rope. Is this something you've included in your plans, Captain Gupta, wear zone management?
Yeah, we do include. We have a big table also to cover this aspect. So basically, there is one side is the residual strength, and the other side is the hours. And there are proper ways that in case it has to be how it has to be managed. So we have this guideline. So if it's a vast topic, it cannot be covered just like that. But in case Mr. Rajesh Ranjan is interested, he can get in touch with me and I can pass on the details to him, at least what we cover in our MSMP, and which I feel most of our vessels, I do not say that all 118 vessels where we have provided have been without any observation. 2 vessels we received observation, and 1 vessel we had a lot of engagement. Basically, it was finally we were able to clear both the vessels. So I'll be very happy to pass on the details to Mr. Rajesh Ranjan, if he is okay to give his email ID, and I can pass on the details.
If I can also chime in, I think the point I want to highlight is that the consultants and the experts, I should call them, play a very important role in developing this MSMP. And there are a lot of questions still outstanding, right? We want to know about, as you said here again, the wear zone management, and who do you reach out to? If you go back to the same set of consultants who engaged into developing this, they may be limited either in their availability. There is no direct, Q&A session with OCMF at this time to discuss it. So again, a platform needed to engage with consultants is also possible. And I think what we're trying to build is a platform that lets you engage not only with consultants across the board and actually share knowledge. That is the key. A question like this not only engages people and come up with a resolution on how to address them, not only for their vessels, but for across all vessels. So I do agree that, and that's why in our approach of building the software, we try to work with consultants. Pace Marine is a consultant who have developed over 100 MSMPs, and there are similar companies who are developing it. And the idea is to bring their experiences into a way in which that can channelize engagement with across the board. So I think what I'm trying to present is that I say it takes a village to raise a child, which means that if you want to make this MSMP a great way to collaborate across the board, we need to bring all the stakeholders, starting from with the guideline, which is OCMF, but also the manufacturers, the consultants, the crew member, and actually the operational staff on board. And that really becomes a more thriving community that is with a single purpose of improving safety and reducing costs.
Wow. So our next two speakers, I think, are from Germany, according to looking them up on LinkedIn. So we've got Kathleen Kuhn, who's a maritime consultant in Rostock, Germany, but she's asking about if you've got a very old ship or an old ship that doesn't have a mooring plan with all the detail in it, does that make a problem making the software? Do you want to take that, Rajan?
It's a good point. I think we do not want to take any, I would take credit for creating magic. So I think the goal is to take the facts that we made available. And I think the old ships tend to have a difficulty getting the information that is needed. And I think, to be honest, we do not create the data set. We do work with consultants who actually work with naval architects to come up with those arrangements. So, but you're right, the older vessels are always a challenge, and just because it's at a point where people worry about how much additional investment we want to make. But I also come back in saying that irrespective of the age of the vessel, you're almost investing a lot of money in the buying ropes. The cost of rope doesn't change depending on the age of the vessel. So it might be worth the investment to just make sure that you have sufficient information to get the MBLs right and the various loading parameters right, and engaging the right naval architect to come up with a value that is acceptable by the class. So I think the old vessels do pose a problem, but I would not treat them with ageism. Ageism is not the way to deal with safety related issues. So I think the safety of every crew member and every vessel is the same. But yeah, we do not create data ourselves. We work with consultants and experts in the matter.
We have created MSMP for the older vessels. So getting the data definitely becomes challenging, and especially when, what is going to be SDMBL, because, there was no sort of a concept like this before for pre-MEG4 vessels. But yes, in consultation with the class and, some of the shipyard data, we are able to identify that. And the MSMPs have been developed, they have been sort of reviewed. Their vessels have been, through the wettings without any challenges. So it is possible. So the answer is yes.
Oh, very good. So next question is from Bucio Ogsenio, who's a senior technical superintendent at Inter-Orient Navigation in Hamburg. He's asking, what's the definition of running hours? Is it when the ropes are connected to the shore bollards, or all the time they're on the vessel mooring equipment drums? Is that for Captain Gupta, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think it's very distinct, say, when they are actually being used on shore bollards, because they may be there on board. But like I can tell you, then many of the operators are replacing tails just after 18 months, 18 months being on board. So for them, so there are two things actually. One is side is the residual strength, and other side is the number of hours used. Now, OCMF or MSMP guidance says that it should be replaced when the residual strength reaching 75%. But then who decides this 75%? That is where the manufacturer's guidance, the crew knowledge, how it is to be decided, that becomes very effective. And because there is no proper guidance on this aspect, that's where the hours becomes important. Then the company says, I don't want to take any chance. You just put it, you just take it out after 2 hours, after 2 years. I don't want to take any risk. So I can tell you that if people are trained to, or the residual strength analysis can be done ashore. So a combination of these things will ensure that the mooring life can be increased. Automatically, it reduces the expenses, and that's what every owner and operator is looking for, that without causing any incident, if I can have the mooring life can be increased without, and with proper maintenance. That is what everybody's objective is,
Oh, that's great. So should we go to Rajesh Ranjan from K-Line? So it's a complicated technical question for Captain Gupta, I think, is the safe ship, well, we've explained STML, the ship design maximum braking load, I wrote it down, of a vessel built before Meg 4, if that's greater than the safety working load of the mooring fittings on board. I guess you need new mooring fittings in that case, do you? Is that a situation you've come across?
Yeah, it is actually. Basically, what happens is that you are not supposed to be having a MBL of a rope more than the safe working load of any of your fitting. That's what the concept is. And for a ship which is going to the terminal, this aspect is very well taken care of. There is no problem. Where the challenge comes in when you are doing the ship to ship, because you may be on a smaller ship, your mooring bollards probably of a SWL of probably 100 tons, and then you are going alongside for a vessel which is a bigger vessel, where the MBL of or LDBF, what we call it, TDBF, or so that may be on the higher side of it. Those can create a problem, So I think in that way, for pre-MEG4, this is the same problem. So in this case, I think the SWL of your mooring fitting becomes the limit. You cannot have, LDBF more than your SWL. This has been a very, very common question. And it has been also noted by most of the vetting inspectors. They find any time it's a short observation which comes to you. So I think it is important that it is kept below the SWL. Normally, you are not supposed to exceed 50 or 55%. Okay, so many of the times they will say that I'm trying to keep it at 50 or 55%, but how do we guarantee that it is going to remain at 50 or 55%? How are you going to manage that it will remain within the WLN? So no one wants to take any chance, and you normally do not have moorings going more than the SWL of the fitting.
Well,
I
so
hope I'm able to clear Ranjan's queries.
Yeah, it's a question from Rajan Saxena. I think you've answered it by typing, but he's asking about is running hours, the number of hours used in each port. I think that's what you said. Yeah. So the time difference between tying the first rope and untying the last rope are the mooring hours. I guess this is quite a complicated question, I suppose, isn't it? But I guess it's a sort of fairly new subject.
No, it's not a complicated question. What he's saying is right, because no one has a time to calculate for each mooring. So what we take is that the first mooring and the last mooring. Even our software is designed accordingly. This software where the first mooring and the last mooring. So during whatever is the time between, all the mooring hours are accordingly adjusted. You can't take that the first mooring was a spring. After 15 minutes, the breast line went. No, there is hardly any difference. So we take the first mooring to the last moorings.
Well,
sorry, I just want to chime in that this is the kind of the tedious work that we want to simplify and also standardize. And yes, there are multiple, there could be company policies that have to be little variation, but you simplify it, as Captain Gupta said, and then this is automatically accumulated across all your mooring operations. So your running hours accumulated, and the software does what it does best, is to do the bookkeeping and keep track of all the hours, and use that in alignment with what the company policies are. So thank you for the
I
question.
think one of the most advantage of this particular software will be the knowledge sharing. There is a great knowledge accumulated on board by one set of crew. Once this set of crew leaves, the new set of crew comes. You can't have a knowledge transfer within whatever 1 or 2 days or 3 days they have the parallel sailing. It's very important that this knowledge is kept on board by recording it within the software, and it is made available to the next set of people, whether by respect of what happened to the moorings in this particular port, what were the terminal spatial requirements, what were the wind and waves, what were the directions, how the vessel was responding to it. All these things have to be maintained. And right now, when I was sailing, we were not maintaining any records, So it was like, okay, we had a guide to port entry, but then it is guide to port entry written by someone a few years ago. Some smart masters were giving the input to it, but not everyone. So I think it is very important that this data is recorded. It is recorded for the benefit of not only for that particular vessel, but for other vessels of the fleet. And if the company decides, yes, I have some good information to share, they can even share it to the other companies as well. So it's very important that the mooring incidents, the mooring expenses are collectively handled. It's not like only one company. It is every company, including the manufacturers. The manufacturers play a very, very important role. And they should be a part of it. They should be heavily involved into training of the seafarers, training of the superintendents, and then only the whole objective of MEC 4 or MSMP can be achieved.
Well, how do you check the condition of a rope? I guess you've got to do a visual inspection as well as counting the running hours, but is it always obvious if a rope needs replacing? I mean, I wouldn't imagine it is it? Or does it need special skill to check what condition a rope is in?
Yes. You develop with the time, so like anybody is sailing. So it's normally by the time you become a chief officer, you develop that skill. But at the same time, there are now techniques available ashore, where certain part is sent ashore and you do this, fatigue analysis and strength analysis. But then, so it's a combination of everything. But as I said, is that it should not be the training developed over the time, but if some proper training can be given to them in this respect, how do you do that? Many of the good companies already do that. These are like value addition training. They are already doing it. We are doing it for a few companies along with some of the manufacturers. So these things play a very important role. So it's like, everything is, if we can handle the hardware as well as the software, we can reduce the incidents, we can reduce the cost, we can reduce the damages.
Oh, well, question for Rajan. So if there's a shipping company watching this and he thinks, well, I get the idea of managing mooring lines, but I can do it with a spreadsheet. It's something you sort of touched on in your talk, but maybe we can go into a bit more depth about this. I mean, how does your software make it much easier for people to use than a spreadsheet? I've got my own answer, but maybe it'd be good to hear your answer.
Yeah, I think the software does replace an Excel sheet, which is obviously cumbersome to use. But our intent is to so if it's one vessel, it's difficult to say whether an Excel sheet does an equally good job. But when you have a fleet of vessels, which I would say more than 5 vessels, or even more than 2 to 3 vessels, what you need to do is to organize all the information. So, for example, how do you keep all your certificates? How do you put your mooring plans, the mooring philosophy, that information in there? How do you constantly check for these rules that are singularly and standardized across the fleet? So I think it gets to a point where the Excel sheets tend to get I would say lost in emails or even in versions of the system. I think if you are trying to create a system that creates collaboration between ship and shore, allows for workflows to happen and then on top of it, you can attach photographs. You have various visual images that you can attach. So I think what happens, it makes it more descriptive. Plus, report writing is kind of part of the system, so you can export reports out. So you can, enter a very few amount of data set. It reuses the information in the in the system to generate reports, morning reports, and the flexibility is that is to, again, with the data analysis part of it. So how do you aggregate information across the vessels to create visualization? So I think Excel is a great way to start. I hope that if people have a document MSMP, they have at least one Excel sheet. So I at any point don't want to reduce the impact of Excel sheet. I think they're a great starting point because it starts the hygiene of maintaining data, and I think this one just takes it to the next level, and hopefully bridges where the gaps are. So the software that is on the cloud and it's allowed to collaborate is definitely one step beyond Excel sheet. But I think Excel sheet is a good starting point. So I do encourage people to use some sort of a system to collate that information and then imagine the next steps and use a tool like ours to take it to the next level.
See, data collection is only 30% of the job done. Another 50% is the analysis of the data and then the action points. So our focus should be that okay, we have the data. I have the data from 1 ship or 10 ship or 20 ships, but then we have to analyze this data. And unless we analyze, we won't be able to see that are we doing good, or we are just maintaining the standards, or we are actually going down in the standards or in our KPIs. So I think it's very important that Excel, yes, it can also analyze, but then it takes time. It takes time, it takes efforts. Not every one of us are so expert, and ship people actually have, it should not become like one extra job to them. Okay. So it's only thing, whatever they were filling in Excel, now they can fill in this software. This is the only thing good. If it can give them the result automatically by analyzing it itself, it's actually doing a good job, So the ship people will start also liking it, the superintendent will start liking it. So I think that the focus should be that it should make the life easier to seafarers. That's what we all should be aiming for. Not like adding one more plan, not like, giving another 2 hours of work. As such, everybody is suffering from workload because of the computers and email, So we should avoid more work to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very important. I keep reading so much about the seafarer fatigue and overwork. So we're saying if you're using the software, it can make it feel far more part of your normal life rather than an extra task you have to do. Whereas if it's a spreadsheet, it's I've got to fill in this spreadsheet, and so it feels more like extra work, or it probably is more extra work. Or
I think I just want to say that there's been it all starts off with creating forms and Excel sheets, and I think people start with the right intents. The idea is, where is it headed? Is it just becoming more and more and more? And I think that's where Captain Pawan, reflected earlier, is that we want to be able to put some advanced techniques of AI where you don't have to you can describe what you're doing and the computer does the work for you, rather than you having to input a lot of data. So I think the future is brighter than where we have come from so far, which is like voice activated inputs or just taking photos. So you talked about, how do I know the residual strength of a rope? Can I take a photograph and do image matching and pattern matching and give you some data sets based on usage hours and all the other signals that you have been provided? And I think those are the kind of work we have to. I think we still need to do simplification. The work is not done, as Captain Pawan said, it's work in progress. But I think the first step is that we get to the point that the crew is aware of what the industry is thinking and how the industry is formulating all these guidelines, and not get lost in documents, and the knowledge is simplified and passed on. So I think once we are at this phase, the next phase is obviously further simplifying. So couldn't the systems automatically figure it out? So the question is, why can't the ropes tell me how often they've been used? Why should I tell them this, how much information? So I think, why can't we make it smarter? I think those are the great motivations that we are trying to encourage, is that let's demand more from everybody. Let's demand more from the policymakers, demand more from manufacturers, that demand from the experts and from the software, not just demand from the crew member all the time. I think there is implicit understanding that I could send Excel sheet in the office and expect the crew to do all the work. So I think this load sharing and I think the clear visibility across. Plus, I think the dashboard that we displayed is also visible to the crew on board. So they know what has to be done. And I trust a lot on the crew members' responsibility. So when they do see something is due and they understand it's important, they do it themselves. There's no point of creating a dashboard analysis on the shore side with some sophisticated software, but there is no visibility on the crew side. So I think I try to flatten the whole of software should flatten the whole ecosystem and let everybody collaborate and participate rather than just having one person do all the work.
Well, so maybe it's a message to Robin Collett from Samson Ropes. If we want a rope that will tell us how old it is and if it needs replacing, maybe there's something for. Well, we're coming towards the end now, but there's another question from Kathleen Kuhn in Germany. How long does it take to feed the software to set the software up and later on board? And she's also using a new acronym, which I don't know, but maybe you do, WZM. I don't know if you know what that means, but the rest of the question is clear enough. You want to say, Rajan, how long it takes to set the software up?
I think we typically takes about we've been encouraging the crew to enter their own data set, and so we took a little difficult path, and it took about a week for a vessel to set up all the information they already had between all the operations they do otherwise. So I think we estimate in a week, and what we do is do a lot of pre-work, which is setting guidelines. Making it simple for them to understand what they're doing. And as you notice in Mac 4, there is like the different elements, which are like A, B, C, D, F, G, H. And the idea is that once you see a very systematic approach of setting the information, then it's pretty much you're using it only when doing mooring operations. So the setup is done one time, takes a week. And then subsequently, we are able to monitor because the system is hosted in the cloud. It's very easy to set up. You just do a sign up on the website and we activate it and it's ready to go. So it's fairly easy to set up. No setup of software or complicated setups. So I think we've done trials and happy to see the proof is in the pudding actually. And I believe the software setup is definitely an important element, but monitoring the usage and trying to make sure that we handhold the crew when they are shifting, the changing crew, we need to be sensitive of those matters. So I come from a practitioner's perspective. Software is only as good as the information that is in there and how often people use it. So,
well, that's great. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left. Captain Gupta, do you have any 1 minute closing remarks or anything like that?
I will finally say that it's a good sort of a action to digitize the MSMP. I have been interacting with all masters, chief officers, superintendents for this MSMP. Like everybody initially thought it's just another plan, and but then if we sort of make them, able to make them aware, yes, how important it is, what are the main objectives of OCIMF and the companies to bring up this plan. And if we can sort of, collate the data, starting, as I said, this is like something like a lifetime cycle. Everything we are able to sort of record it from, one crew member to another crew member, one master to another master, chief officer to another chief officer, superintendent to another superintendent. Then I think it's a good tracking, and then later on good analysis. I think it can really make sure that the objectives of nil accident, of minimize the damages, okay, and to increase the life of the moorings. If we can achieve this, it will really help the whole industry.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I've just remembered my toothbrush has some dye on the bristles that tells me when the toothbrush is wearing out. So perhaps we can see the same thing for mooring lines. We're just coming to the end of the hour, so I think we'll finish there. But thanks ever so much. I think that's very interesting. What we wanted to do is get people interested in mooring line management and see that it's important without overloading people with yet another piece of work. And I think we've shown how to do that. So thank you very much. And I'll pass back to Farah for the closing words. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our guest speakers, Rajan Vasudevan from Ocean Manager and Captain Pawan Gupta, and of course to all our viewers. We'll be sending you a YouTube video link soon with their email if you have any further questions. Join us for our next webinar this Thursday the 29th, which is called Better Ways to Use Weather Data for Routing, Why the Shortest Route Isn't Always the Most Efficient, sponsored by Spire Global, which you can book online at our website. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.